What is going on, everybody? It is TripleCrown24 back today with a question that I'm posing. And the question is, it should match the title of the video unless I change a few things around. What is my hobby identity, or what is your hobby identity? I'm going to answer that question for myself, but it's one that I pose to you as well. And as a subsequent question, how is that identity determined? Is it something that we can do ourselves, or is it the collective opinion of the general public about what our identity is in the hobby? So, why the heck am I talking about this? Well, that is a great question. I'm going to tell you a little story about why that came up. One quick note: I apologize that the background is a little messy. You'll understand why that is here after I tell my story, because it relates to what I'm going to talk about today. So last Thursday, I went to a shop that I hadn't been to before. Kind of the backstory behind it was that at the Midwest Monster in July, I bought that Willie Mays Super Fractor. Some of you may remember if you watched my recap for that one. And I bought it from some guys who have a shop that is about 45 minutes away from my house. It's actually in a town that I lived in for about a year when I was younger. And so it's always cool to go back there and kind of just see how things have changed. And one of the things that has changed, of course, is that there's a card shop there, which is really cool. There was a card shop there before. It was actually within walking distance of my house, but I never really went in there. I don't know why, but that aside, I had told these guys that I was going to come visit the shop sometime, and I had a little bit of time last week where I decided, you know what, today's the day I'm going to go make the little trip up there. So I did. And I went in, and the shop is pretty cool. It's called Ohio Card Exchange. If you're in the area of Dayton, Ohio, Centerville, Ohio, that's where it is. And highly recommended. The owners are great guys, and I like how they have it set up. They kind of have the card bar set up where you can open wax or go through the boxes there. They have value boxes. They have singles. They have like a wall of like what people are looking for. They have a wall of like Polaroids where people took their pictures of like the big pulls that have come out of the shop and stuff. It's just a cool, it really does have like a community feel to it. And they've done trade nights. They just had their last one this past weekend. I had plans already, so I didn't go to that one, but definitely interested in going to a future trade night there. But overall, I like the community aspect. So there was one gentleman who was working there on a Thursday morning when I came in, and we kind of talked for a little bit. I told him that I had some of my stuff out in the car, just seeing if maybe he wanted to buy some of the stuff that I had on me. And we kind of talked for a little bit too. And he asked me one question that really stuck with me. And I've kind of been thinking about it on and off ever since I left the shop, because it caught me off guard when I heard it. And it kind of relates to some stuff that I've been talking about with some friends recently too. He asked, am I a collector, or am I more so just a flipper? And that really resonated with me because I had to stop and think about it. And my answer to it was that I pretty much am a flipper. And it felt really weird to say that because it is the first time that I think I've ever said that or identified myself as that. And why I felt weird about saying it is because there is a certain connotation that comes with the word flipper in the hobby. And that connotation is generally negative. Feels like flippers are to blame for a lot of what we say are problems in the hobby right now. And I will certainly agree to that to some extent, that the crowd that is more oriented towards flipping is the reason that certain things are more expensive now than they were before. It is definitely something where you can kind of link those two things together. Is it the sole reason why? No, not necessarily. In fact, no, I'll say no in general, but they are a major contributor, if not a very the most predominant contributor to certain aspects. But is being a flipper a bad thing? Well, when you ask that question, I like to refer to myself as a dealer, right? It sounds better. It sounds like professional, and it has a more positive connotation to it. The question for me becomes, what really is the difference between a flipper and a dealer? How long do I have to hold a card for it to become not a flip? How long do I have to hold a card to be called an investor if someone wanted to label me as that? I certainly do not believe myself to be an investor. I wouldn't use that term. Again, the term that I use is dealer. But to not identify as a collector feels odd to me because that is really why I got into this, right? I started my YouTube channel as a collector going on 4.5 years ago. I did some videos way, way back in the day, but really in its current iteration, my channel's been going strong for about 4.5 years now. And part of that was that I built my foundation. A lot of people got to know me as a collector, and I started to transition into becoming a dealer and then eventually a full-time dealer. And nobody really changed their perception of me. I've kept a lot of the friends that I had when I first started to now. People come and go, of course, but nobody has viewed me differently than when I was a Mickey super collector or I was an autograph collector. Regardless of how I might have approached the hobby, I like to think that the person that I am has only changed for the better. I haven't stayed stagnant. I have definitely changed over time, but my core principles have not changed. But to label myself as a flipper, I don't know. I just felt weird about doing that because I didn't want to be lumped into this label or classified under this label that would limit me from opportunities to do business with people or for people to perceive me a certain way. So for the longest time, I have kind of tiptoed around that label and have tried to stay in the dealer mindset. But at the end of the day, I really still to this day don't understand what the true difference is between a flipper and a dealer. And I would love to hear your feedback in the comments. What do you think is the difference between the two? And or is there a difference? I guess it might even be a better first question. And if so, what is the difference? So I really thought about that more and more, and kind of recently what I've been doing with my business and how I've kind of shifted things around is that I am certainly becoming more and more of a flipper. Now, am I going to Walmart and camping out to get optic or select blasters so that I can sell them for $5 to $10 more? I'm not doing that kind of flipping. To me, that's just not enough there, and it would be too much time and too crazy to try to do that. It's not really something that I'm interested in. Single card wise, absolutely. I will still go through dollar boxes to try to find $5 cards. And it's one of the things that I enjoy doing most. It gives me that adrenaline rush and really just brings out that passion that I've had for the longest time. Um, with that being said, I have made some changes to the business over the last month or so that, again, really fall into that flipper mindset. I want to share those today too, but I first wanted to introduce the question so that nobody felt like they got clickbaited or anything. But um, what am I doing now that is more flipperish? Well, I have decided to turn back to a resource that I pretty much swore off doing business with again. And I'm going to share my screen right now, and this will come as a shock to some who know me very well, who haven't heard about this. But as a matter of fact, I have gone back to COMC. I know, a bit of a shock because if you know me right now, I have been very critical of COMC in the past. I first started submitting cards to them in 2015 to use their service. And then for a while there, I was just buying cards from them for my super collection. Once I had sold that off, I didn't really use their site. And especially during the start of the pandemic and then the height of the pandemic, I got very critical of COMC. They have a different way of doing PR than I do. For me, I'm someone who if there's a mistake that's made, I'm going to own up to it. I'm going to try to limit the excuses I might make, even as tempting as they may be, and I'm just going to try to do better. Whereas COMC, I feel that their approach is a bit different, where they don't take responsibility for a lot of things, or they just try to blame things. And one of my biggest criticisms that actually led me to being blocked on Twitter by them was that I got frustrated that people were waiting forever to get their shipments, and they kept saying, well, due to COVID, we can't do it. And one of my criticisms of them was like, look, I understand that COVID has put a strain on every single business and person out there. There's nobody that has been unaffected by it. But the biggest problem that I see with it is that everybody else has seemed to figure out a way to work in what people call the new normal. That term I feel gets overused a lot, but a lot of people have felt that they have learned a way to adapt. Where COMC has not adapted, and they were, in being in Washington State, one of the first places that really got negatively impacted by the pandemic, that experienced shutdowns or restrictions on who could be in a building, and all the reopening procedures that went on. They were under some of the tightest lockdowns within the United States. So to me, that was just incredibly frustrating. And I thought that, um, the lack of accountability and the lack of just letting their backlog just continue to pile up was frustrating, and in a large sense just irresponsible. And to their credit, they have done a lot in the past year to kind of right what I thought were the wrongs of that time frame. I think that part of their circumstances was that they got bombarded, like many other companies did, during the peak of the hobby boom. And now that things have cooled off a bit, a year and a half later, since the height in early spring 2021, they have done a lot better. They have improved their shipping times. They have improved their communications. They have improved certain policies. I won't get into too intricate detail here, to the point where I can see the improvement. I can see that they listen to feedback and they try to make things better. And to me, I can respect that. I am willing to give a second chance to someone who is willing to listen and willing to try to do things better. And I honestly feel that they have done that. And that was one of the reasons I went back. And also another reason was that they provide me with a service that I have been looking for about a year now. What do I mean by that? Well, when I started moving into this office space, one of the idea was that I was going to hire employees to work part-time with me to help with getting cards listed into the store, to help with pricing out things, sorting cards, getting shipments ready. And I did have two part-time employees that I had work for me for a couple months each. The big problem that I ran into was that they weren't very experienced with cards or just sports in general. And the learning curve, you don't quite understand. I mean, if you're, let me just use this example because I think this is something that everyone can pretty much relate to. Someone in your life, your personal life, who asks about like cards and you got to explain it to them, you kind of tiptoe around the details because you know that they're not going to understand what you're talking about, or you can't use certain terminology. You try to keep it simple for them just because there's just so much, lingo within the the hobby lexicon that would be lost on the average person who isn't really interested in cards or the hobby in general. And that was kind of what I experienced, was that there was such a sharp learning curve to what I was doing on my own to be able to teach that to someone. It took forever. And even then it wasn't perfect, nor would I expect it to be, but it was definitely frustrating. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. And I really couldn't trust certain tasks just because I wasn't able to teach these tasks or to have them replicated. And that to me was a sign that, it was going to be a bit harder and I needed to do something different. Another thing that got me, that has really started to add up with inflation, is just the cost of shipping and the cost of acquiring certain things. To go to the shows, to buy out value boxes or buy certain things is more expensive now because gas is more expensive than it was when I first started. Gas prices have never been higher until this year. I was used to getting gas for well under $3 a gallon, and now around here it's still $3.50 a gallon. Not as bad as where it once was, but it adds up over time. In addition to that, the cost of envelopes, especially with like supply chain issues, the cost of printer paper that I would use, the cost of top loaders, penny sleeves, card savers, all of these things that when you look at the unit costs, they are pretty cheap. And buying these things once every so often, maybe it doesn't seem like it adds up, but it really does when you start to think about all these costs that go into it. And it really makes you think that some of the postal rates, this isn't to encourage them to raise the rates, but it makes you really believe that you're getting a better deal just considering how much all these costs go into it. That's a different topic though. But with that said, it was one of those things where, okay, I need to build in these costs to my prices. And unfortunately for me, one of the things I ran into is that there are a lot of sellers out there who are willing to do things cheaper than I can. And I can't do them that cheap because I have overhead here. I have to pay for the rent in this office space. I have to pay for my utilities, my internet usage. I have to pay for these costs. And maybe someone who's doing this on the side or someone who's doing this from their own home, they don't have as many of these costs, or they would be paying them anyways, right? They would be paying on their home because they live there, or they'd be paying for the internet because they already had internet in their home, whatever the case may be. And I was running into this where I could sell these cheap cards that I love selling, but I would have to, basically just eat a bunch of the cost where I would be working for pennies on the dollar at some points just to sell these cards that already had a lower probability of selling. And then in addition to that, having to deal with complaints and returns. And it seems like I had a lot more of those issues. And in fact, those issues were almost exclusive to the cards that were $5 and under. Very rarely do I have an issue with something that's more expensive. It typically is the cheap stuff, and trying to explain how standard envelopes works to buyers who don't know how the tracking works, and then they get frustrated with you because you're not the one delivering the mail. It's a lot of headache for not a lot of money. Um, and quite simply put, there were a lot of people out there, and there are a lot of people out there who could do it better than me. And when you factor in just having to keep up with the consignments and basically still having to do all that stuff as one person, even though I have people helping me in certain aspects, I couldn't, I still couldn't really get more momentum behind me. I wasn't really reducing my workload all that much. It would just kind of be replaced as something else. So this kind of came to a head last month where I decided that, you know what, this just isn't worth it. I need to be able to utilize my time more effectively. I need to be able to offload some of these responsibilities, but I need to do it where I can pay someone a price to do it for me that isn't going to eat up all of my margins as it had been. So I looked back at COMC, and they charge 50 cents a card now to upload a card to their website. So it does limit what you can send in. You can't just send in any random base card. There is the storage fees if the card is more than 75 cents in asking price. And taking all that into consideration, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to bite the bullet on some of these cards that I just can't send in there, but I can put them in my quarter boxes for shows. I can put them in my repacks that I do. I do little team packs that have 30 cards in them with an autograph or a relic card. Some of you who have seen me at shows have seen them before. And I can take that instead and then just move my cards to COMC, have them take the pictures, have them denote the condition issues. All I have to do is set the price. Someone else buys it. They want to go flip it. They can do that. They can have it shipped to them. They can have it just sit there at COMC's facility, whatever the case may be. But they were doing the work that I needed to be done. And I thought about it for a long time. I researched it a lot. I went back and forth in my head and looked at what were my criticisms in the past. And I felt that they had addressed most of them, or at least enough where I could give them a chance and feel good about it morally. One of the biggest hesitations I had is that COMC has kind of developed somewhat of a reputation as a flipper site. And you can see that right there on some of the cards that I have sold recently. It shows you what I bought them for and then what I got for them after fees. And it makes it very easy to kind of track your flips. I'm in an advanced reseller mode, which is something they didn't have last time I sold on their platform in 2019, or at least I didn't really consider it back then. And back when I was selling, then I wasn't really doing the flipping thing on their site. But for me, it's almost like going to a show and being able to have instant gratification with the value boxes, right? There's value boxes that are constantly being updated, and all I have to do to access them is a click of the button. Right here, I can just scroll up. I'll go to baseball cards. Here's all of the new cards that have been uploaded, and I can go through all these and see if there's anything that jumps out to me right off the bat. And to me, that was just something that it made a lot of sense for what I do. So I've just kind of started out with it again, And one of my biggest fears with it was kind of developing that flipper reputation, or I guess having some kind of stigma around my brand as a flipper. But like it or not, as I was asked in that question at the shop on Thursday, I am a flipper in the sense of it. A lot of the actions I do would fall into line with what a flipper is. I'm sure some people would call me that. I'm sure some people would call me a dealer, but I've kind of learned that if someone wants to not interact with me because they think I am X, Y, and Z without getting to know me as a person, that is their loss and not mine. And I've stopped worrying about it. I've stopped trying to protect this sacred image and trying to be what other people want me to be rather than being what is best for me and best for kind of my vision in building my brand. And I want to be that dealer who gets cards for people to complete their sets or adds to their player collections. Or my goal has not changed. It's just that the tools that I am using to reach my goal are what has changed. And I feel, to me, that this is something that will help me going forward. That doesn't mean I'm shutting down my eBay store, but what I am basically doing now is that anything that is over $20, I'm going to handle on my own. I'm going to do that as kind of my day-to-day stuff, and that will be the stuff I take with me to the shows, aside from the value boxes. So anything that's in that $1 to $20 range is going to go to COMC. That's where my lower end store is going to be held at. Anything else that isn't worth it for COMC will go into my value boxes for shows or my team packs. So I'll still have those cheap cards available at the shows and be able to cater to a wider audience. It's just not going to be where I have the eBay store where I'm having to put in all that extra time, because there are people out there who can just do it better than me. And sometimes it hurts the pride to admit that, admittedly, but pride pride doesn't pay the bills. So I kind of have leaned in to this idea that, there are things that I do that I am a flipper, and there's no way around it. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I don't have to have the stigma around me, because I know how I carry myself, and I won't let this label define who I am in the hobby. I'm going to carve out my own place, and I don't want to be just a collector, just a dealer, or just a flipper, or just limit myself to one of those categories. I want to be TripleCrown24. That's who I want to be. And I want to have that as my own separate identity. So I thought I would share that experience with you. I'm going to show off some cards if you stuck with me this long. I'll just kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about. So these were 5 cards that I got in from Whatnot. 2 separate purchases, but the first one here, it's an Otani autograph from Leaf Flash. That is something that would be more so a day-to-day thing that I'm going to handle. So that's a card that will stay with me and go in the store. And then I bought this lot of Stadium Club Chrome. So this is a Jeter Gold Refractor. This is actually a pretty solid card. So that's one that will stay with me. But someone like this Roger Clemens, guess probably a $10 card, I will send that off to COMC, just because it would be easier to sell it on there. It might help people who want to pay one combined shipping cost as well. I think that's one of the benefits too. But COMC will take care of it from me from there, as long as I set the price and keep up to date with it. Same here with these Taylor Trammell Orange Refractor, Justice Sheffield Orange Refractor, cards that still would appeal to team collectors or rainbow builders, set collectors, people who like certain refractors, however they may choose to collect, and that resource is there. But their website can help me achieve my goal and build up my business the way that I want it to, and not be somewhat stagnant as it has been over the past year, regardless of what people may think about it. So that was the video today. I hope that you enjoyed it, kind of a bit of a peel back the curtain. And I wanted to kind of pose that question out there and tell you some of my own struggles I've had with answering that question. But we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Till then, take care, stay safe, be kind.